I've had a lot of support from gardeners and beekeepers watching my channel, and I want to share some of this knowledge that I've acquired as a brand new beekeeper. Now, I might be new myself, but I've learned a whole lot about beekeeping in just a short amount of time. So if you're not a beekeeper, but you really want to follow along with my journey here, then I'm going to show you a couple terms that you should really know about for beekeeping. Let's start by introducing the pieces that you can see from the outside. First off, we generally call this entire thing a hive, all of it put together. It could have several pieces, and it usually also talks about the bees inside. Let's talk about these boxes first. First of all, we can talk about them in terms of size. There's three general sizes. This is called a deep, and it's the largest of them. Then there's one slightly smaller called a medium, and it's very common. And then there's a shallow, which is much less common. We can talk about these boxes in terms of purpose. There's two main purposes to these boxes. This one is called a brood box, and that's because this is where the queen is, where she's going to lay her eggs, and where all of the brood is stored. I could stack boxes on top of this, and depending on what I want to use it for, it could be a brood box or a honey super. A brood box is for additional brood, and a honey super is where they're going to store honey, and often where I, the beekeeper, am going to take honey from. This bottom piece here is not attached to the box, and this is called the bottom board. It offers protection to the bottom of the hive and also provides an entrance in the front. You'll see a small block here in the front. It's a different color, it's unpainted, and that's called an entrance reducer. The purpose of the entrance reducer is to reduce the entrance. But the reason for that is we want their hive to be defensible. These bees need to protect their home from other pests that are trying to get in and steal their honey or take over their hive. So by reducing the entrance, we're allowing them to defend a much smaller piece of the hive. The entrance reducer can actually change in size. I can completely take it off and have it wide open. I may want to do that if it's an especially strong hive, or I may want to keep it very, very small if it's a little bit weaker hive. This right here is called the top cover, and it provides protection from the elements. Just like the roof of your house, this top cover is providing protection from rain and anything trying to get in from the top. You can see it has an overhang, just like your house does, to make sure that the rain comes off the sides and doesn't get into the hive. Moisture inside a hive is not a good thing, so you want to make sure it stays nice and dry inside. Unfortunately, that also means scorpions like it a whole lot. Now let's open it up to see what's inside. This is called the inner cover. This provides separation from the boxes and the top cover, so it's easier to remove. This little hole here can be used for what they call top feeding. It's a way to give sugar water to your bees from the top. All of these individual pieces here are called frames. Frames come in different sizes depending on the box. Some boxes can hold 10 frames and some can hold 8, depending on your needs. Now let's take a frame out and talk about it. Here's one of our frames. This black part right here, this is called foundation. This comes with the frame. It's made of plastic, and that's what the bees often put their honeycomb onto. The plastic foundation already has that honeycomb shape to encourage bees to make comb in that shape and in that size. This here is the honeycomb. These pieces here, this white stuff right here, that's called a cap. That's when they put something over top of the honeycomb when they want to seal it up. A cap can go on top of honey, or it can go on top of brood. If you can see the shiny stuff inside, that's nectar that the bees have gathered, and they're turning it into honey. And here, these white caps are where they've already turned it into honey, and they put a cap on top of it. This piece of honeycomb here is called burr comb. Burr comb is a piece of honeycomb that's not growing where I want it to grow. we have these frames in such a way that we're trying to encourage the bees to make honeycomb in a very systematic way so that it's easy for us to extract the honey and easy for us to manage the hive. But this right here, bees are gonna do what bees are gonna do. So they've made some burr comb here on top, and every now and then I'll come in here and I'll scrape that off, and I'll take this burr comb and I'll turn it into beeswax so I can use it on the foundations later. This is called a hive tool, and it's one of the very few tools that a beekeeper really needs. This tool has a taper on this side. It's not sharp, it's not like a knife, but you use it to pry apart the frames because they get very sticky. The bees stick them together and they make them very hard to get apart. So you need something that can wedge in between the frames and pry them apart so that you can lift them out of the hive. The other end of the hive tool is a hook, and this is used for picking the frames out because sometimes it can be difficult, especially with fingers like these, to try to get the frame out of the hive. This is not the only kind of hive tool, but I think this is one of the most common ones. But you really need something that can pry the frames apart and something that can help you get those frames out. Another essential tool for a beekeeper is a smoker. The purpose of the smoker is to keep bees calm. The smoke that this generates confuses the pheromones that the bees use to communicate, and it makes them calmer, which is really what you want as a beekeeper. The way this works, well, I'm not very good at still, but in general, you want to put something flammable inside this little container. The whole thing is made out of metal. You put something flammable inside, you light it, you hope that it stays lit, and then you cap it because you don't want an ongoing flame, you only want the smoke. This part right here delivers air through the bottom when you squeeze it. This air, number one, allows you to stoke the flame to make it stronger when you're starting it. And number two, it will deliver the smoke out through this hole so that you can push it exactly where you want the smoke to go. This smoker has a cage around it. That's basically to protect my hands. I don't really want to burn myself, and this is going to prevent me from doing that. If my bees are getting a little aggressive, if they're a little bit angry, I give a few puffs of the smoke and it usually calms them down. I may also use a smoker to smoke myself so that the bees don't try to attack me all the time. This is definitely essential if you're dealing with bees that are especially aggressive, or like today when I've really ticked them off and they really are coming at me. I gotta smoke them out. In my opinion, the beekeeper's most important tool is protection. Without this stuff, I don't even know if I could approach those hives. There are very experienced beekeepers out there that don't wear any protection at all, and lots of respect to them, but I couldn't do it. That scares the daylights out of me. I'm a new beekeeper, and this gives me both safety and peace of mind that I'm not going to get swarmed by my own bees. So I'm very thankful for my bee suit that has a hood on it that I can zipper and Velcro to make sure I'm completely sealed, and my heavy duty gloves, because when I'm handling those bees, the last thing I want is them crawling all over my hands and stinging me. You've seen this before. This is a feeder. The size of this is a shallow. We talked about the 3 different sizes of boxes, and this is a shallow sized box. And this is a feeder. What it's used for is feeding the bees. The bees may need something to sustain them during times when they're not able to make honey for themselves, or if they're low on honey in their hive. Generally what you put in here is a mixture of sugar water. It's 1:1 sugar to water, or during some other times you may want to increase the amount of sugar that you put in. What's really cool about a feeder like this is the part that you feed This is the part that you fill with sugar water, and usually they're not able to get in there because bees, although they're smart, they're not great swimmers and they drown themselves very easily. So what's neat about this is from the bottom, the bees can crawl into this little gap from their hive, from their frames. They crawl up into that little gap and they're protected by this little cage right there. So they come up in there, they come out through the holes, they climb down this little fence, and they can get the sugar water. And because they're still hanging onto that cage, they're less likely to drown. This is called a nuke. Nuke is short for Nucleus hive, and it basically means all the essentials to start a beehive in a box. When you first get your nuke, it has everything you need to start a new hive. It contains frames that are full of honey and brood and lots of bees, and most essentially, the queen bee. So what's really easy about a nuke is you just take these frames out, you place them into your hive, and they're good to go. Another term that you should know is apiary. An apiary is the collection of all the beehives that a beekeeper takes care of and usually extracts all the honey from those beehives as well. I do feel like a little bit of an imposter. I've only known about these terms for a few months myself. I'm a brand new beekeeper. But I really hope you've learned something today and that you found this interesting, and I hope you can utilize some of this knowledge while you're watching some of my other videos on beekeeping. And until I see you again, be safe, be kind, and be well.